In today's video, I'm gonna show you guys how to achieve the cinematic look with natural light. Now, we all watch these movies and sometimes they take place outdoors and they just look super beautiful and cinematic and have 3D and just look incredible. And then when we shoot our exterior scenes in broad daylight, it looks like shit. Well, how do we do that? Let's break down what a cinematic image even is. A cinematic image is when an image looks three-dimensional, has shape and contrast through shadows, lighting, and color. To create a three-dimensional image, you wanna have different layers. You wanna create contrast with colors and contrast with lighting. And this is what gives that illusion of 3D. I shot this commercial a while back and we actually used all natural light. And I thought it was a great example of how to use natural light. So I'm gonna show you guys a couple interior scenes and a couple exterior scenes where we use natural light in different kinds of ways. So let's dive right into it. So the opening sequence of this commercial, we're welcomed into this apartment where we see this guy at a drawing board. So this was actually all natural light. Before even shooting this entire project, I went to each location to check them out to see what the natural light would do. So I would have a sun app called Lumos, and I would be able to see where the sun would be in correspondence to each location. This is gonna play a huge factor in creating that cinematic image. You wanna know where your sun is gonna be. So I used the app when I went to go check out this location before we shot, and I knew that the sun was gonna be going like this, in this direction, so that the sun at like 9 a.m. would push through this window, and at 12 p.m. it'd push through this window. So what does that even mean? This is two different looks. If I was to shoot at 9 a.m. on a broad sunny day, it would create a beautiful side light on his face. But if I was to shoot at noon where the sun is behind him, that would be more of a backlit scene. It would be heavy backlight on him and more silhouette-y. I was able to go back to the drawing board in pre-production to determine where we wanted to shoot, what time of the day, and where it would fit in the schedule. And I wanted the scene to have a lot of like hard light, which is like these little dapples of like, you know, hot spots in the room. And I wanted the light to be more sidey. So we shot at 9 a.m. And that's because the sun was positioned perfectly to push sidey through this window right here. To give some context, the commercial was a lower budget, so we weren't able to get like a ton of lights. So I really wanted to play with natural light. And so that's why I put that much work ahead of time to figure out where the sun position would be so that we would get that natural, beautiful light hitting his face. So you can see here in this image, right? We utilized this beautiful window here that's kind of bouncing off the ground and bouncing back up at his face and kind of pushing some ambient light onto his face there, because we got that beautiful, you know, just little bit of kick on his face. And then we kind of made the shadows pretty dark here because we added just some negative fill. We added some negative fill, you know, 4x floppies, or you could use black fabric. And what that did was help create that contrast on this side of his face. And shadow usually helps creating that more three-dimensional look to your image. And so we just shaped that natural light, right? When you're going with natural light, it is so important to shape it. And so to shape it, it's creating shadow, right? So to create shadow, we use that black fabric. And then I have my camera positioned in this room over here where you see the dark foreground walls. And I use that foreground to create that more, you know, three-dimensional composition. And then I used a little lamp right here, and that was just a regular lamp that we found in the location, just to give a little highlight, little interest, little, you know, warmth to the frame, because the rest of our frame in the scene that's taking place is a little bit colder. So this warmth just gives that kind of color separation as well, right? That's what we're kind of looking for as a cinematographer. We're looking to create that contrast through light and shadow or color. So that's what I was doing here. I was trying to create this color contrast between, you know, the colder look outside and, you know, our foreground. And we were really lucky that on this day it was overcast. When the clouds are in front of the sun, it just naturally creates a softer quality of light. And so that's why the light in this scene is very soft. So let's dive into some of the close-ups in this scene here. So after this shot, we see him, we are kind of pushing in, and then we reveal a close-up of him at the drawing board, right? He's drawing away. Now going into the close-up, I kind of had my camera here, you know, shooting on the shadow side once again, just to create that more shadowy three-dimensional look. Because if I had my camera over here, right, on the front lit side, you know, it would look probably pretty flat because the window light here is gonna be kind of pushed all over the entire room. And I just prefer to keep my camera on the shadow side. So what we had here is the window light just coming and hitting him in the face. And you can even see some bouncing off of, you know, the drawing board that's below him and bouncing back up and just giving that beautiful kind of skip light here on his chin. And I love playing with silhouettes and a little bit of a darker image. So I was okay crushing the shadows a little bit more and just kind of exposing or leaning more towards the window exposure. And I just thought it had a really beautiful natural look to it. And it's super simple again, right? And then we just had, you know, some 4x4 flops creating that beautiful shadow on his face and creating that kind of depth and dimension, right? Because my camera is pointing towards the window, we're looking out through that window into some depth out there. We're creating, you know, leading lines, there's depth and that shadow there, right? That shadow is just kind of creating that three-dimensional look on his face. And then we're just edging him with the window light, which is looking so awesome. And I just felt like, you know, the scene just leaned into this more natural, beautiful look. And it's really simple, right? Like it's going back to just shaping that light. Here's actually something interesting. Here in this scene, the sun actually came out of the clouds and it had this little break. And I was like, oh, we gotta roll because we had this different quality of light. It's more harsh, you know, there's a little bit highlights on his nose, you know, there's a little bit of a different quality. The shadows are a little bit more harsh, right? Okay, so now we're at a scene outside and we play with natural light. And once again, you know, we checked out this location, believe it or not, again, before shooting this project, and I knew where my sun was gonna be positioned, right? This is east over here, this is west over here, south and north, and the sun rises and goes over like this. So I knew that either, you know, the morning sun would be really beautiful and this would be backlit, or the setting sun over here would be beautiful pushing that way. And I had to figure out where I wanted my camera positioned. And I knew I wanted my camera to be positioned mostly shooting this way, and I love shooting backlit. So I knew shooting at sunset would be the most beautiful because that would give me the desired lighting, the backlight look. We kind of got there a little bit earlier, around like 5 p.m., which was great. So I positioned my camera here, kind of facing out to the water because the sun was over here and it was kind of edging my characters, you know, here. And then it also kind of created this beautiful look here. It kind of like front lit this rock here. And it kind of created this beautiful layers. Like we have this layer here, right? It's like this diagonal line going across in the composition. We have, you know, this bluer, colder shadow on this side. And then we have our beautiful kind of warmer, sun-kissed, harder light, different exposure texture on this side. And I think this kind of composition is super beautiful because now we're creating layers, right? We have the color contrast here with the blue and the warm. And then we also have, you know, this leading lines out to the ocean, which is super beautiful. And we're also creating layers with different lighting values, right? We have a darker shadow side here and a more bright kind of highlight over here, which is super cool. So then when we got into the close-ups, that gets a little bit more tricky, right? So how do we kind of light, you know, if you notice, if you're shooting out in the noon sun or shooting out in broad sun, it's really harsh on your face. When the sun is like that, I like to kind of wait till when the sun is lower in the sky. And then that way the position of the light is pushing more sidey, you know, creating a different kind of shape of light. Again, right? I positioned my camera on the shadow side. Common theme here, right? And then the sun was all the way over here setting here, and it was just backlighting our cast here. And then I just leaned into the silhouette of it. You know, she's kind of silhouetted here, but I thought it was beautiful. You know, we still have different textures and different color contrast going here. We had the warm sun hitting her hair, the beautiful color contrast between the bluer shadows here. And then again, you know, you have the horizon here and just so many leading lines. So I'm just creating beautiful composition and I'm just letting the sun do its work by doing the backlight. If you watch most Hollywood films, no matter where the camera's looking for most part, it's always backlit. It just makes it look better immediately. That edge light and then just kind of leaning into that just looks amazing. Or you can side light your characters with the sun and then diffuse it. Diffusion is a great way to shape your light. And then this is what you're gonna see. We eventually shot the reverse shot of the shot you just saw. And here we have the sun hitting his face, but it was a little too harsh. So what I did was I took a diffusion frame. You know, you can find this, you know, on Amazon. It's like you can have like a pop-up one of those circle ones, but I don't like to do it too thick. What happens is your character is gonna be a lot darker because when you diffuse it, it cuts down a lot of light, and the exposure between your character and your background is not gonna be balanced, right? You wanna make your image balanced. So I like to do, it's called a quarter grid diffusion or a silk, usually a China silk. These are not as thick. It doesn't take away too much exposure from your scene and doesn't make it feel like, why is the character so soft, but then the rest of the world is like hard light. I had a quarter grid diffusion frame. It was just like a little 4x4 size, and that just created this beautiful soft light on his face and had this beautiful, you know, Rembrandt. And to get that Rembrandt, I just positioned the actor, you know, in correspondence to the sun. It's creating that Rembrandt on his face. And again, look, I'm shooting on the shadow side. Again, my camera is here looking at the shadow side. And then I even had a 4x4 flop. And what that was doing was creating that shadow on his face. And that's how I got this beautiful kind of Rembrandt look on his face. Diffusion and then some negative fill to create that shadow. Because if I didn't have that negative fill, it would just be kind of like potentially a more high key look. To end this video, this is my favorite shot from the whole commercial. It's them setting up the camp and looking out to the sunset. I knew I wanted to look out to this view, right? I wanted to put my camera up high and look out to this beautiful view because you got these beautiful leading lines, right? Diverging into the distance. We knew that because I said before we were seeing where the sun was setting, it was setting all the way over here. So you had this beautiful sunset. And all this was, right, it was like we just had like, you know, little light bulbs here strung up here, you know, boom, creating this beautiful glow. You know, just we had like, I think like a flashlight or something inside this tent, just kind of glowing that. And then that was basically it. And we just turned on the headlights of our motorcycle just to give some highlights, right? Like your eyes are drawn into this image because of the highlights, right? Like you have these little beautiful pops of different exposures, and that flashlight is actually edging them here, which makes them stand out more, contrasting this beautiful blue water. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like some great takeaways from this video is to create these cinematic images outside. It's just finding, you know, composition that makes your image look three-dimensional and where the light helps amplify that, where it creates it more shape in your frame and different qualities of light and different values of light, right? Like some hot spots, some soft light, some color contrast. These things are gonna make your image look cinematic in the end. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give a thumbs up, and I will see you guys in the next video. Oh yeah, also subscribe if you enjoy these. Sweet. All right, peace.